The air hung heavy with the promise of a tempest, a fitting backdrop for the kind of story that washes up unexpectedly on life's shore. It began, as many do, with a broken boat and a grizzled old sailor. But by dawn, the tide would bring secrets from the past, carried on the hull of a Navy vessel. This is the story of Jack Sullivan, a man etched by the sea and time. At 68, he was a former Navy senior chief, a title that carried the weight of decades spent on the open ocean. For 20 years since his retirement, he'd run the same weathered harbor he'd purchased, a haven of practical solutions and quiet solitude. Small talk was a foreign language to him. The sea had taught him the eloquence of action. His calloused hands were a living testament to a lifetime of mending what others had abandoned, a silent chronicle of an unwavering commitment to things that worked. He liked his life just as it was, uncomplicated and familiar, seeing no reason for it to be otherwise. The Navy had been his entire world from the age of 18, a constant horizon stretching before him. He'd navigated the treacherous waters of combat and storms, serving on destroyers and aircraft carriers, ensuring their engines never faltered. Yet, when retirement finally arrived, the thought of life away from the water was unimaginable. The small coastal harbor became his sanctuary, a place where his hands could remain busy, a shield against a world that grew more perplexing with each passing year. Still, whenever the silhouette of a Navy ship cut across the distant horizon, that old undeniable sense of belonging would stir within him, a lingering echo of his past. When storms lashed the coast, Sullivan was always where he belonged, in his workshop. While other businesses battened down their hatches and closed their doors, he worked tirelessly, ensuring local fishermen could get back on the water with minimal delay. His Navy years had instilled in him a deep understanding of coastal communities, an unspoken pact that their survival depended on mutual aid, whether openly acknowledged or not. Little did Sullivan know that fate was about to weave a new thread, drawing him back into the very military world he had so deliberately left behind. Everything shifted one stormy afternoon in late September. The sky had turned a brooding gray, mirroring the escalating fury of the waves that climbed higher with each passing minute. Sullivan was securing equipment, preparing for the full brunt of the approaching squall when he saw it. A sleek yacht battling the relentless current, its engine emitting a death rattle, the unmistakable sound of serious trouble. The yacht's engine coughed one last, despondent time, then fell silent. Inside, Ellie Reynolds slumped against the wheel, a wave of profound frustration washing over her. At 32, she had already navigated more setbacks in her marine biology career than most researchers encountered in an entire lifetime. This old yacht was more than just a vessel. It was her lifeline, carrying her invaluable research equipment, transporting delicate samples, everything. Now it was nothing more than useless driftwood in an increasingly enraged sea. A sharp pang of regret pierced through her. She should have heeded her father's advice. A retired Coast Guard officer, he had pleaded with her to upgrade, to invest in a newer, more reliable boat. But grant money was a finite resource. Every precious dollar meticulously allocated to research, leaving nothing for boat repairs. As the tendrils of panic began to coil around her, a flicker of memory surfaced. Wasn't there a boatyard nearby? Some old-school place her father had mentioned once, run by a crusty ex-Navy man who possessed an uncanny ability to fix anything that floated. Sullivan's Harbor Repairs. The name echoed in her mind. Through the swirling mist, the rundown dock materialized, a relic from another era, a faded sign, boat parts piled haphazardly outside. This was clearly not a fancy marina with uniformed staff and cappuccino machines. This was a place of salt and grit. She sighed, knowing it wouldn't be cheap, but with the storm bearing down fast, she had no choice. As her yacht drifted reluctantly into the ramshackle harbor, a hulking figure emerged from the shadows, squinting into the rapidly darkening sky. He was older, his face a canvas of weathered lines, lined from years of sea and sun, a faded navy tattoo peeking from his rolled-up sleeve. He didn't offer a smile, only a guttural, "Problem?" Ellie took a deep breath. This wasn't some friendly customer service representative she could charm. This guy looked like he chewed nails for breakfast. "My boat won't start," she said, the words feeling childish, like she was facing her father's disappointment all over again. Sullivan wasted no time on pleasantries. He strode toward the yacht with the unwavering determination of a combat medic approaching a wounded sailor. Ellie followed, hoping for the best, but bracing herself for the worst. Engines were not her domain. Her life revolved around marine ecosystems, coral reefs, and collecting samples, as far removed from mechanical work as humanly possible. "Open the engine compartment," Sullivan barked, his voice cutting through the rising wind as he fumbled with the hatch. The compartment groaned open, revealing the salt-crusted engine within. Sullivan leaned in, his calloused hands disappearing amidst a maze of wires and hoses. Each of his grunts sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Ellie. What Sullivan was about to discover would either salvage her critical research mission or sink it completely. But the old Navy man couldn't know that by tomorrow his quiet, ordered life would be irrevocably turned upside down by people he thought he'd left behind decades ago. After what felt like an eternity, Sullivan emerged, a deep frown etched on his face. "Fuel pumps shot. Electrical system got salt damage too." Ellie's heart plummeted. Boat repairs would drain her already limited grant money before she could even begin to ask. Sullivan was already listing parts and costs, a torrent of technical jargon that completely overwhelmed her. "Best I can do is get you running, but this boat's seen better days," he said, as the first heavy raindrops began to lash against the dock. "Better days?" The phrase echoed hollowly in her mind. Those were in short supply. Funding cuts, skeptical department heads, equipment failures, bills piling up. All of it crashed down on her at once, a relentless tide of despair. Sullivan must have noticed something in her expression. "Look," he said, his voice softer than before. "It ain't my place to pry, but you seem overwhelmed." Ellie usually hid behind a bright smile and a can-do attitude. But Sullivan, with those salt-stained eyes that had witnessed true hardship, saw right through her carefully constructed facade. Tears threatened to spill over. "It's just everything," she choked out, gesturing helplessly. The broken boat was merely the final unbearable straw. To her surprise, Sullivan didn't look annoyed. He simply leaned against the boat, arms crossed, as the rain fell steadily around them. "Sometimes things pile up like barnacles on an old hull," he observed, his voice a low rumble. "Can't fix everything at once. Start with the basics." His words hit her with unexpected force. Not sympathy, but a rugged, practical wisdom that perfectly mirrored her own stubborn nature. Suddenly her problem seemed less crushing. Maybe she couldn't fix everything, but she could fix this boat. So what are the basics? Where do we start? She asked, a flicker of hope reigniting within her. Sullivan's mouth twitched slightly, a subtle hint of something akin to a smile. First, we get inside before the storm drowns us. Then we see what we can salvage. As they hurried toward the workshop, neither could have imagined how this chance meeting, born of a broken engine and a raging storm, would connect them to the highest levels of naval operations. By tomorrow, Sullivan's quiet harbor, his sanctuary from the world, would become the undeniable center of attention for people he'd spent 20 years meticulously avoiding. For the next 2 hours, they worked through the storm. Ellie, no stranger to arduous tasks, became a determined assistant. Sullivan's assistant, holding flashlights, fetching tools, learning more about engines than she'd ever thought possible. They quickly developed a rhythm. Sullivan diagnosing, Ellie fixing. Each clang and click of metal, each tightening of a bolt, meant undeniable progress. The work, surprisingly, cleared her head. Her research worries faded into the background as she focused entirely on the immediate task at hand. For once, her PhD didn't matter. This was about practical solutions, and it felt surprisingly good. Between repairs, they talked. Sullivan wasn't just a grumpy mechanic after all. He complained about modern boat designs, grumbling about computerized systems that couldn't be fixed with basic tools. He spoke of Navy missions that had taken him across the world. 26 years, 7 ships, chief petty officer on the last 3. Engine room was my domain. His shoulders straightened slightly as he spoke, revealing the quiet pride he still carried. Ellie, in turn, shared her own struggles. Research grants that barely covered student loans, her relentless dreams of coral reef conservation, and the constant fight to be taken seriously in a field still dominated by older men with secure funding. Coral reefs, Sullivan mused, never understood 'em myself. Yet, a flicker of respect showed in his eyes as she passionately described her work. He might live with engines and fiberglass, but he recognized true dedication when he saw it. As the storm eased, they finished the emergency repair. The new fuel pump brought the engine roaring back to life, a triumphant sound. Ellie couldn't help but smile. Sullivan barely acknowledged their success. Should get you where you need to go for now. The bill was surprisingly reasonable given the circumstances, a quiet gesture of understanding. As she prepared to leave, Ellie found herself unexpectedly reluctant to go. She had expected a quick fix and a gruff send-off. Instead, she had found something she didn't know she needed: honest advice and a poignant reminder of her own resilience. "What about the other stuff?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at the electrical system and everything else. Sullivan wiped his hands on a rag. "One thing at a time. Come back next week and we'll check it out." He paused, then added, "Truth is, I'm not exactly busy, and you're not bad with a wrench for a scientist." From Sullivan, that was the highest praise. Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Next week I can do that. Should I bring coffee?" Sullivan almost smiled. "Better be strong. None of that fancy Italian stuff." Ellie left feeling lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. Her problems, the grants, the bills, the overwhelming research, were still there, but they no longer seemed impossible. She'd fixed more than her boat today. She'd found something strong inside herself and forged an unlikely connection with the grumpiest mechanic on the coast. She might not have a big research budget, but she had a direction now. What she didn't know was that her name had already appeared in a secure military database. An automated system had flagged her presence at the old naval mechanics location. By morning, events would be in motion that would change both their lives forever. 1 week became 2, then 3. Tuesdays at Sullivan's became an established part of Ellie's routine, a welcome break from her hectic schedule. She'd stop by after collecting samples, bringing takeout and coffee strong enough to remove paint. The radio in the workshop played old Navy songs that Sullivan seemed to know by heart, humming along off-key. Sullivan pretended to hate but hummed when he thought she wasn't listening. They made a good team. Ellie's sharp eyes often caught things even Sullivan missed, and though he'd never admit it, she saw the glint of respect in his gaze when she solved problems that had momentarily stumped him. Ellie learned quickly, figuring out how to diagnose engine issues just by listening. Her yacht, under their combined care, improved dramatically. It wasn't perfect, still showing its age, but it was reliable now. That was like Ellie herself. A bit messy, still finding her way, but getting stronger and more dependable each day. Then, one afternoon, as rain clouds gathered once more, they heard it. An engine too expensive, too smooth and powerful for this humble harbor. A man in an expensive suit stood on the dock next to a gleaming yacht that looked utterly ridiculous among the working boats. Sullivan emerged from the workshop, his usual scowl darker than usual. "Ryan Parker," he growled, as if the name itself were a curse. Ellie slid out from under the engine she was working on, suddenly acutely aware of how she must look. Greasy overalls, messy hair, oil-streaked face. Ryan Parker was Sullivan's sworn enemy, a ruthless developer who owned marinas up and down the coast. His ambition was to bulldoze Sullivan's harbor and erect a luxury yacht club in its place. For years, Sullivan had adamantly refused to sell, even as Parker's offers continued to escalate, mirroring the rapid development of neighboring properties. "Reconsidered my offer, Jack?" Parker, asked with a practiced fake friendliness. "The neighborhood's changing. This," he waved a dismissive hand at the weathered buildings, "is the past. My development is the future." Sullivan's no was firm and final, leaving no room for negotiation. Parker looked Ellie up and down with obvious disdain. "I see you've got a helper now," he said with a condescending smile. "Things must be really desperate, Sullivan." His words stung Ellie, not because they were true, but because he couldn't grasp the quiet, functional world they had built here. Ellie stood straight, channeling her father's military bearing. "I'm lending a hand," she stated clearly, her voice steady, "and I'm good with boats." Parker's fake smile vanished as Sullivan looked at Ellie, a flash of unmistakable pride in his eyes. Right then, surrounded by tools and boats, Ellie knew she belonged here, regardless of what people like Parker thought. After Parker left, his promises of life-changing money echoing faintly in the old boathouse, Sullivan muttered about developers destroying tradition for profit. Ellie saw the weariness in his eyes and felt a fierce sense of protectiveness for this stubborn old sailor. "You okay?" she asked softly. Sullivan shrugged. "Don't like change. Used to be you fixed a boat, charged a fair price, and people got what they paid for." He gestured toward the fancy marinas, visible in the distance, structures that offered convenience without substance. "You do good work," Ellie said firmly. "They might be flashy, but they don't know boats like you do." Sullivan studied her for a long moment. "Kid, Sometimes I forget you got a good head on your shoulders for someone who likes coral. Coming from Sullivan, it was the highest possible praise. Neither suspected that Parker's visit had triggered something far more unexpected. His company's background check on Sullivan's property, a routine part of his aggressive acquisition strategy, had flagged classified naval records, a chain of events about to bring Sullivan's long-buried past crashing into his present. They spent the afternoon rebuilding a water pump in comfortable silence. Before leaving, Ellie made a decision that would change everything. The next week, while Sullivan worked on a sailboat, Ellie approached him, a worn notebook full of sketches clutched in her hand. "Got an idea," she said, showing him the designs she'd worked on late into the night. It was her marine conservation dream, transformed. The plans showed a floating research platform with a repair dock, combining sample collection with boat repairs. She'd even found salvaged materials they could use with some creativity and hard work. Sullivan looked from the intricate sketches to Ellie, his brow furrowed. "What the hell is this?" "A research station on water," she said, her voice filled with determination. "More than that. Boaters' assistance with environmental research, oil changes, quick fixes, and marine surveys after the boat's fixed, for people who care about both practical needs and making the world better." Sullivan's face transformed, a slow grin spreading across it, surprising as calm after a hurricane. "That might just be crazy enough to work." Before he could say more, a powerful engine sound interrupted them. Not Parker's yacht, but something bigger and undeniably more purposeful. They turned toward the harbor entrance. A Navy vessel was approaching, sleek, gray, and official. Officers in uniform stood at attention on deck. "Sullivan," Ellie said, a note of confusion in her voice. "Are you expecting visitors?" The old mechanic went pale, his expression unreadable. "No," he muttered. "No, I am not." The Navy vessel docked perfectly alongside Sullivan's weathered pier. The contrast was striking, military precision meeting decades of civilian wear. Sullivan's entire demeanor changed. Despite his age, he stood straighter, shoulders back, chin up, a military man facing authority again. "Stay here," he told Ellie, his voice low. "Just stay here." He walked toward the dock with measured steps. 3 officers disembarked. The leader, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair, wore a captain's insignia. Her eyes took in everything around her before focusing sharply on Sullivan. "Chief Sullivan," she called, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Not Jack. Not Mr. Sullivan. Chief." Sullivan. It's been a long time. Sullivan stopped. "Captain Harris. 20 years and 4 months, to be exact." Captain Harris smiled slightly, her composure still precise as ever. She gestured to the officers behind her. "You remember Commander Ramirez and Lieutenant Commander Chen?" Sullivan nodded stiffly. "Coronado Operation Briefing Team." Ellie watched, utterly confused. Sullivan had never mentioned specific missions or people he'd served with. What was Coronado? Why were high-ranking officers tracking him down after 20 years? Captain Harris's gaze swept over the workshop doorway and landed on Ellie. "Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, I presume? Marine biologist specializing in coral reef ecosystems under climate stress?" Sullivan's head snapped around, clearly shocked that they knew who Ellie was. Ellie stepped forward, wiping her hands on her greasy overalls. "Yes, that's me. But how do you—" "We should talk inside," Captain Harris interrupted smoothly. All of us. This isn't for open air. Inside Sullivan's cramped office, Captain Harris placed a tablet on the desk. We need your expertise. Chief Sullivan. Both of you. She showed them a series of satellite images of an underwater structure. Those look like artificial reefs, Ellie said, her professional curiosity piqued. But unlike any I've ever seen. They're not standard artificial reefs, Captain Harris confirmed, her gaze steady. They're remnants of Project Poseidon. Sullivan went pale. Project Poseidon was decommissioned in 2002. Everything was removed according to protocol. That's what we thought, too, Lieutenant Commander Chen interjected. Until Dr. Reynolds' research drone found this last month. My drone? Ellie stammered. I was just mapping reef formations. There was nothing unusual in my data. Your drone's secondary sensors detected an energy signature, Captain Harris clarified. When you uploaded the data to your university server, our monitoring system flagged it. The truth unfolded, piece by piece. Project Poseidon was a highly classified network of underwater monitoring stations designed to track submarine movements along the coast. And Sullivan wasn't just a mechanic. He was one of the lead designers and maintenance specialists for the entire system. They now needed both Sullivan's unparalleled technical knowledge and Ellie's expert understanding of the marine ecosystem to safely decommission a forgotten underwater station before its power core could damage the environment, or, critically, before Parker's dredging operations accidentally exposed it. So, you need us to locate the station and safely decommission it? Ellie asked, trying to process this unexpected, monumental turn of events. Yes, Captain Harris confirmed immediately. Sullivan looked up from the satellite image, his mind already shifting gears. I'll need complete schematics and diving equipment rated for 100 meters. Already on our vessel, Commander Ramirez said, his voice crisp, with a technical team awaiting your instructions. Sullivan turned to Ellie, his expression serious. This should be your choice, too. This isn't boat repair anymore. This is classified naval operations, dangerous ones. Ellie thought about her research, the fragile reefs she dedicated her career to protecting, and Sullivan, who had taught her more about resilience in weeks than years of academia ever could. I'm in, she said, her voice firm. When do we start? What happened over the next 2 weeks became local legend, though few knew the full classified story. The official version mentioned only environmental research and mapping. The reality, midnight dives, unstable technology, and Sullivan's uncanny ability to remember complex systems he'd designed decades earlier, remained classified. But some things couldn't be hidden. Sullivan's profound, renewed connection with the Navy, Ellie's revolutionary coral preservation techniques, and the undeniable transformation of Sullivan's Harbor itself. When they returned, Sullivan found new floating docks, replacing his dilapidated pier, pristine and strong. His workshop had been subtly upgraded, maintaining its familiar appearance outside, but housing modern equipment inside. And in the corner of the harbor sat a gleaming research vessel, Reynolds and Sullivan Marine Conservation, painted proudly on its hull. Captain Harris pulled some strings, Commander Ramirez explained, a rare smile gracing his lips. Compensation for continued consultation services. Sullivan touched the new dock, his expression unreadable. I didn't ask for this. No, Ellie said, standing beside him, a quiet strength in her voice. But we earned it. In the months that followed, Sullivan's Harbor became something neither could have imagined when Ellie's broken yacht first drifted in. It was part boat repair, part cutting-edge marine research, shop, part research station. It served both practical needs and cutting-edge scientific research. Sullivan still complained about new technology, but now he did so while expertly using state-of-the-art equipment. Ellie still talked passionately about coral, but now she did so while helping local fishermen install sustainable gear. When Ryan Parker returned with government officials he thought would finally force Sullivan to sell, he found not just a stubborn mechanic, but a Navy-backed research facility with protected status. "Times are changing, Parker," Sullivan said, a rare hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Just not how you planned." The floating research platform Ellie had sketched became a reality, expanded with Navy engineering, but meticulously true to her original vision. One evening, Captain Harris visited, unofficially. She found Sullivan and Ellie arguing companionably over an underwater camera design. "Quite the operation you've built," Harris observed. "Not what I expected for retirement." "It's better," Ellie added, her gaze meeting Sullivan's. "We're doing more good together than either of us could alone." Captain Harris nodded. "Sometimes, the best missions are the ones you don't plan." She raised her coffee cup in a silent toast. Two unexpected partnerships. 6 months later, a young marine biology student stepped off the bus at the small coastal town. She'd heard about the Reynolds and Sullivan Marine Conservation Center and had come to apply for an internship. Making her way down to the harbor, she was surprised to find not the sleek, modern research facility she expected, but something that looked more like an old-fashioned boatyard, albeit with modern equipment tucked into every corner. An older man with weathered features was arguing animatedly with a woman in a wetsuit about the best way to modify a research vessel's engine for more efficient operation. "Excuse me?" the student said hesitantly. "I'm looking for Dr. Reynolds." The woman turned, her face lighting up. "That's me. You must be the new intern?" "Yes, You're late," the older man growled, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Boat's waiting. You any good with a wrench?" I'm studying marine biology," the student stammered. The woman, Dr. Reynolds, laughed. "Don't mind Sullivan. That's his way of saying welcome. And don't worry. I couldn't tell a socket wrench from a screwdriver when I first came here either, but you'll learn." "Can't study what's in the ocean if you can't get to it," Sullivan said, his tone softening slightly. "Boat engine dies. All your fancy degrees won't help you." As the intern followed them toward a research vessel, she noticed something unusual. Local fishermen waved respectfully to Sullivan. Navy personnel in civilian clothes nodded to him as they passed. And the equipment. Some of it looked distinctly military grade, definitely not standard for a small marine research station. "What exactly is this place?" she asked Dr. Reynolds quietly. Ellie smiled, a secret understanding in her eyes. "It's what happens when an old Navy mechanic and a marine biologist decide the ocean needs both of them. You'll see." Sullivan's harbor wasn't in any textbook or official research directory, but among naval engineers and marine biologists alike, it had become famous as the place where practical knowledge and scientific theory worked side by side, each making the other stronger. For a grumpy old Navy mechanic and a determined young marine biologist, the journey had only just begun. But this time, neither one was navigating alone, and that made all the difference.